The 2023 Spanish Grand Prix is in the books, and much like the 2022 edition of the race, Max Verstappen once again walks away as the winner. However, if you look at the broader perspective, a lot of the other teams actually made some big gains, although there are a few teams that, truth be told, found themselves lagging behind just a little bit. But overall, it does give you a very good idea of what the direction of the fight will be for teams beyond Red Bull, because let's be fair, those Red Bull cars just look like they're on another planet right now. However, the rest of the field is very tightly bunched together, but it does appear that the tides appear to be shifting in the favor of one particular team. At least that is a little bit of a premature declaration on our parts, but as you're going to find out in this video, where we'll go through the major talking points of the Spanish Grand Prix, well, let's talk about the most obvious one first. Verstappen cruising once again. Now, it is worth noting that Verstappen was cruising to such an extent that he ended up exceeding track limits on 4 separate occasions, or rather on 3 separate occasions, and thereafter was even shown the black and white flag, which is basically a warning of that if you don't end up stopping doing that, you'll get a 5-second penalty. Yet, even if he had been hit with that 5-second penalty, he would have still finished the race about 14 seconds ahead of second place Lewis Hamilton. That is how dominant the car was. That is just how far ahead he was of everyone else. And even though he was consistently complaining through the race that his hard tires were sliding and weren't giving him as much grip, he was lapping at a speed fast enough that the Mercedes cars were nowhere near close to catching him. That is the level of dominance that, truth be told, we've come to expect from Verstappen and Red Bull this season. But it bears repeating just how good it really is, because really they're on a different plane when you're comparing the other cars. And in Verstappen, they have a driver who's so dominant that not even his teammate in Sergio Perez can actually end up matching him. However, one team, as I said, will be very happy with the kind of progress they've made, and that is the Mercedes team. Now, you remember that Mercedes in Monaco ended up introducing a new upgrade, which included, of course, new side pods, change to the suspension, as well as a little bit of a modification to the flow. Now, Monaco is never the best place to judge just how good or bad these upgrades are going to be, because it's a very unique circuit. However, in Spain, we got to see just how good or how much better the Mercedes looked in race trim. And believe you me when I say it was a car that was indeed giving off best of the rest potential. Now, they weren't that good in qualifying, because Lewis Hamilton actually started the race only in 4th place, whereas George Russell was in fact out of the top 10. He was starting in the second half of the grid, but both of them ended up making up significant ground, getting the overtakes in that were necessary, and finished 2nd and 3rd. That is massive gains. And of course, they were helped by the fact that some of their other rivals ended up making a little bit of blunders. What blunders? Well, for one, Ferrari once again find themselves the talk of town for all of the wrong reasons. For one, something that they couldn't really control, Charles Leclerc was having so many problems with the car that he ended up finishing P19 in qualifying and chose to actually start from the pits so that they could get the car out of parc ferme and also ensure that they could get the necessary setup changes, as well as getting a few new components into the car to make it more comfortable for him to drive. That didn't really help that much, because again, this Ferrari was supposed to be running much faster than it should have been previously, but he couldn't really run through the grid. In fact, he only ended up finishing 12th, which even with Yuki Sonora's demotion, which we'll get to in just a bit, Leclerc is only finishing 11th. Now, from 20th or 19th to 11th is not the kind of race through the pack that you were expecting to see, especially considering the fact that this is a Ferrari driver we're talking about, and a Ferrari driver whom many people see as a future world champion. But the car might very well be the problem, because again, Carlos Sainz was caught up in problems of his own. For one, he couldn't really keep the Mercedes cars behind him for too long. For the other, he too ended up getting called in at a very wrong time for a tire change, which in hindsight proved to be very, very ill-timed, because the Mercedes cars ended up timing their stops much better and were thus able to hold on to 2nd and 3rd, with Russell even pretty comfortably holding off Sergio Perez late in the race, despite both of them being on the soft tires. That's how well Mercedes had timed their strategies as far as the tire calls. Ferrari, well, it's another weekend where they're going to be left frustrated, not just at the fact that their car isn't working as well as it probably should, but the fact that the strategies continue to fail them. Another team who will be a little bit frustrated was, of course, Aston Martin. They ended up having, remember, throughout this part of the season, they were the team that was second best. In fact, Fernando Alonso had finished on the podium in all races so far this year until we reached Spain. Unfortunately, this time around, they finished 6th and 7th, which is okay considering the fact that last year Aston Martin were barely competing for points, but it's a steep drop off from the kind of performances they were showing this year, where don't forget, in Monaco, Alonso was in with a genuine outside chance of actually winning the race. Here, though, neither of the Astons could really keep up with the pace of the Mercedes cars. In fact, Stroll, despite overtaking Hamilton early on, could not eventually hold Hamilton back. And once Hamilton got ahead, it was go time for him. Same with George Russell. And Stroll only held on to 6th position because Fernando Alonso was rather generous to say, I'm not going to fight Lance, I'm just making a bit of a gap from the other cars. But the fact that they finished 6th and 7th whilst the Mercedes drivers finished 2nd and 3rd means that Mercedes have now leapfrogged the Astons for 2nd place in that Constructors' Championship. And remember, if you finish higher up, each position higher is worth $10 million more in terms of prize money. So you want to be finishing that much higher because it gives you more money to add into your budget for the next season. Right now, and again, this could be a premature call considering the fact that Spain has always been a circuit that suited the Mercedes cars. Aston Martin look like they're falling a little behind and they need to come up with something soon to ensure that the fight for 2nd place remains just that, a fight. Speaking of fights that were pretty good, I mean, Yuki Sonora was in the points positions throughout the race and was doing pretty well considering this AlphaTauri just hasn't really had the kind of race pace that a lot of the other midfield cars have had, when he was hit with a 5-second penalty for what the stewards at that point felt was an impeding of, let's say, Zhou Guanyu. Zhou Guanyu had gotten ahead of him by just a little bit, but Sonora held his line. And it was a fair move. Most people thought there would be nothing of it, but the steward surprised everyone by handing him a penalty. Now, that really there was the major problem when you're looking at how it is a race is, judged. The stewards, remember, are not permanent employees. Stewards change from race to race, and you have a voluntary system of sorts for stewards. And truth be told, it's just reaching a point where there doesn't seem to be a week where we're not talking about inconsistency when it comes to how it is decisions are applied. Was this a penalty? Not in my eyes, and not in the eyes of a lot of the commentators who were stunned that Sonora got a penalty for what was essentially hard but very fair racing. Because again, there was no contact between the drivers. Sonora didn't actually force him off. All Sonora did was hold his line, which he was well within his rights to do considering Zhou Guanyu wasn't fully ahead of him. So as the car ahead, he had the right to the racing line. He stuck to that racing line, and Zhou Guanyu had to go into the runoff area, which again, as I said, it's hard racing, sure, but it's fair racing. And Sonora, if I were him and if I were AlphaTauri, I'd be looking to lodge a protest against this decision ASAP, get the thing overturned, and let him get that 9th place finish, which he so deserved. And that's it from us in this edition of the F1 Talking Points post-race show. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can let us know by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to tap that bell icon also, and also leave us a comment. Plus, you can go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and don't forget to download the Sportsbook app too. Thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned to Sports Today. We'll be bringing you lots more from the world of sports. For now, from my side, goodbye.